In the last part of this series, I dealt with understanding the culture of Yasharel from the beginning. We have been taught the scriptures from a standpoint of religion, but it is not the way that we should understand the scriptures through. The scriptures are a blueprint of our way of life. As I have been working on the Testing Christianity series, which is not done by the way, I have more to say, but in order to teach those things, this understanding about the culture of Yasharel is very important to grasp. As we talk about Christianity, most people don't recognize the history of how Christianity was created and how people became Christians. When Gentiles took over and hijacked the covenant, this was the beginning of Christianity in this world. And then they highly intermingled and mixed in Greek, philosophical, pagan culture with the faith of the Hebrews. And that's what Christianity is. And you see, because two very important understandings have not been taught in depth, most people can't understand what actually happened. Those two important things are understanding the culture of Yasharel before Christianity became the major influence, and also understanding the culture of the Greeks before Christianity became the influence. Please understand that we are not educated, we are just indoctrinated. If you can understand the difference in cultures between the Greeks and the Hebrews, you will better understand why Christianity is a religion of tares, because it is a blending of Greek pagan philosophy mixed in with the scriptures of Yasharel, all adapted to make the Christian faith. But if you don't understand the culture of Yasharel and their intolerance to the ways of the other nations, you would not understand this clearly, and this is why these things have to be discussed. And even more than that, for those who already understand the falsehood of Christianity, and you just want to be what our Father desires us to be, I just want you to understand the culture of Yah and what He desires for His children to be. You see, so many people have a problem with the Torah, and when they hear about the law, because they have been influenced by Satan, they shut down. And they want to reject any mention about the Torah. And this really should not be. So I want to make things clear here, and I'm going to try to break this down as simple as I can. Listen, our Father, Yahuwah, chose Yasharel to be His chosen, set-apart people. Okay, got that. Next, our Father, Yahuwah, gave His chosen, set-apart people, Yasharel, a Torah. Okay, now look, the word Torah in Hebrew, it really means instruction or guidance. It has been called law in translation today, which gives a wrong impression of what our Father was actually doing. Torah means instruction in Hebrew. Look it up for yourself. So back to what I was saying. Our Father, Yahuwah, gave His chosen, set-apart people, Yasharel, a Torah, instructions on how He wanted them to live. Now let me ask you a question. Do we have an adversary? What does Scripture say our adversary will do? Satan deceives the whole world. Do you think that Satan wants the world to know and live by the instructions that Yahuwah gave His people? Do you think that he will be for that or against that? Please ask yourself, do you think it's more likely that it will be Yahuwah the Most High or Satan, our adversary, that pushes you to not want to live by and apply the Torah in your life? Please answer that question to yourself. Who benefits the most by the attitude of rejecting Yah's instructions? If you answer this truthfully, you can see the agenda. I mean, there are people that comment on these videos every week just because they are against keeping the instructions our Father gave, and they feel that you're actually sinning when you do so. Let me be as clear as possible that this channel is not for you if you feel this way. And so if you want to argue about this, you should just stop watching and unsubscribe. It's clearly not for you. You will not wear me down on this though. I believe our Father's instructions are one of the most important things in this world to understand. And the more that we study them, the more we allow the Ruach HaKodesh, His set-apart spirit who dwells in us, it allows Him to grow and give more room to lead us. And this is extremely important. So while we are covering the falsehood of Christianity, it is even more important to understand the instructions of our Father and remove ourselves from the satanic influence that wants you to look at our Father's Torah, His instructions, as something that we should not be following. That's a satanic view. It's do as thou wilt. Do what you want. That's satanic. Our Father has rules. He has instructions. If you're now saying that you don't need to follow His rules and His instructions, you are now saying that you are going to do what you want. Do what thou wilt. And that's satanic. So listen, we're going to continue to discuss his Torah, and we're going to understand the culture that he created in his chosen, set apart people. This was not a religion. Understand it like this from this perspective. Everywhere around the world, there are nations of people with a certain culture. If you ever go to an Islamic country, there is a way of life there that you cannot interfere with. They have a culture. I mean, go to Saudi Arabia and try to push your own values in with their culture and see what happens to you. They have a culture. And ironically, much of it is stolen and interpreted from the Torah of the Hebrews, just with their own twist. Just saying. My point is that their religion is their culture. And what we have been given in Christianity is a culture that is said to originate from the scriptures, but they add lawlessness in, which is why, in just a week or so, the world will openly celebrate the devil and their reborn sun god and think that they are actually worshiping our true Messiah. Truly wicked and blasphemous. But what do you expect when people have no law? I'm done with all that though. No more tolerance for any of that wickedness. I want to be what Yah desires us to be. And I want to go back to the culture that he has created. And I want to show him that I love him and I honor him. And we do this by keeping his commandments. I want his instructions for my life, and I want to live by them. And I want those who truly love him to live by those instructions as well. And guess what? When we do this, we'll live in a much better world. But Satan has been aggressively deceiving everyone. So all this, it needs to be retaught from a different perspective than what people have learned it under. When discussing the Torah, you must understand you're not learning about it as burdens or rules that hinder your life. You're learning Yah's way that wants to bless your life. His Torah will bless your life. If you understand the culture and understand his instructions and why they were given, you can understand that all he wants to do is cover us and give us life abundantly. The devil wants to steal this from us. So he teaches us a mindset to reject the very thing that is for our good. And that is the major mindset in Christianity. So we're going to go back to our culture, and that's just that. The devil, he can't stop it either. This is Bible prophecy. You're living through it. So we're going to continue to discuss the culture of Yasharel. Let's begin. Okay, so in the first part, I started this by breaking down the most important points to our culture. It emphasized in being set apart and rejecting the ways of the other nations. This is the first and most major thing you need to understand. You know, when you really look at things, you can really see why Satan took away our culture. Like if you ever go on vacation and you see others that are labeled as black people and they're on the same vacation, because they took our culture and heritage away and basically said, we have no culture. When many of us go and visit other countries, we adapt to their ways. We go pick different parts of the other nations and believe that this is what we are. We're this, we're that, which is why and how many of our people have gotten into witchcraft, which many label as spirituality or New Age or yoga or Eastern philosophy, whatever. Because we don't know our heritage, we gravitate to whatever culture seems to fit with what we want. I mean, how many of your baby boomer parents have all those carved images, all these African statues, all this African stuff from things that they have no idea about? They just think it's Africa, so they just grab to it, not knowing anything about it. It's because they don't have an identity and they're looking to grab onto any culture that they can grab onto that gives them an identity. It's extremely dangerous. Because we don't know our heritage, we gravitate to whatever culture seems to fit with what we want. So when you look at the period today and you look at these people, descendants of slaves, putting up Christmas trees in their homes, it really shows how strong these people conquered and indoctrinated us. This was never our culture, ever. We are victims of indoctrination. It's because we don't know who we are and we don't know our culture. And if we knew our culture, these things would not happen. So like I was saying, being set apart and rejecting the ways of the other nations is a mindset that you must have now. And this will guard you from the enemy. And as we grow in this topic, I will revisit this point about being set apart. Now, as I was going through trying to understand the next part of where Yah wanted me to go with this, I initially thought I was going to go into more of the cultural instructions he has given, like against whoring and against witchcraft. But he directed me in a different direction in going over a topic that is widely misunderstood about his Torah and a major reason why most people misunderstand it. That is going over clean versus unclean. You know, when you read the Torah, like in Leviticus, you can read all these things and become overwhelmed and be like, this is just too much to handle. The minute you feel that way, know that the devil will come in and say, yeah, you're right. You'll never be able to learn all this. Plus, it's not even important. That's the devil. The reason why these feelings can come in is because you don't truly understand the why. Why is he saying these things? Now, you technically should not need to know why in order to be obedient. But because the devil has done such a number on us and confused everyone and told everyone to stay away from this Torah, sometimes understanding the why can make you understand why you must go back to the truth. So I think it's important to understand a few things. We are in the 21st century. The amount of knowledge that we have on things is tremendous. I mean, if we are feeling certain symptoms right now, we can type them into Google and they tell us what it is that we're dealing with potentially. What I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of knowledge and experience right at our fingertips. That's all I'm saying. I mean, we also have hygiene products. We have toilets. We have sewers. Our life is very different compared to the time when the Torah was given to Yasharel. And so this is important. If you read the Torah today, based on your understanding of the world today, and not look back at the way the world was when the Torah was given, you can misunderstand the reasoning for his instructions. Yahuwah had a Torah and a culture that if people followed it, they would be utterly blessed. He had a culture that if his people were to follow it, it would prevent them from most sickness and disease being spread. It would make them healthy and keep them growing strong. I want you to think about this. We worship Yahuwah as our creator, right? We know he is creator of all things. Now, if he made everything and then gave us a blueprint of how to live amongst it all in order to be fruitful, healthy, and prosperous, why will we argue against keeping it and following it? He specifically told Yasharel not to follow after the ways of the other nations. He never said not to follow his ways. He despises the ways of the other nations. He knows what's right for us. Why does he know? Because he created us and he created all things. If we just followed what he said, we would be blessed. This is what he said. Let me explain further. When understanding the Torah, understand it from this perspective. Our Father, he didn't speak about things the way we hear them now. This is good for your body. This will be healthy for you. This will make you sick, bloated, and fat. No, that's not the way he spoke. He directed his people and gave them instructions. You see, faith and love is trusting him even if you don't know what he's going to do or why he said certain things. Unfortunately, because we have been taught to follow him in such a false way, people need to understand his instructions before they ever follow him. That's one of those things I've always had to talk with my wife early on. Is like she would only follow me if she understood why I was making certain decisions. But that's not following your man. You have to trust that I'm making good decisions and making the right decisions for us. That's what following is. So yeah, people need to understand his instructions before they follow him. And this is because of Satan. But the way the culture was supposed to be, this is what he said. If you follow it, you will be blessed. If you don't follow it, you're going to be cursed. Let me explain it like this. Yahuwah wants you to live clean. Clean. Just keep that word in your head at all times. If you live unclean, you will have problems in different areas of your life that you're unclean in. So let's look at the ways he wants you to be clean. First thing is with our foods. Eat the animals that he has deemed clean. He says, "For I am Yahuwah, who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your Elohim. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the animals and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten." Leviticus chapter 11, verses 45 through 47. I mean, he broke it down clear as day. This is their culture. He gave the animals that they could eat, animals that they couldn't eat, period. So our culture is to distinguish between the clean and the unclean animals. So everything that you do, everything that you're looking at is you're analyzing, is this clean or unclean? But you know what Christians have done? Is they now argue against this and they say this statute has been nailed to the cross. It's not because it's true, it's because they don't actually want to follow it. And this started from the beginning of Christianity when the Gentiles took over. Like I read some of the quotes from the early church fathers in part 8. Let me read them again. We do not follow the Jews in their peculiarities in regard to food, nor in their sacred days, nor even in the well-known bodily sign. That's Tertullian. Also, Tertullian said, the same God, therefore, who prohibited meats, also restored the use of them, for he indeed originally allowed them. Tertullian. These are the early church fathers. They rejected Yah's law. He said, do not eat these things, and they said he restored the use of them. You see, they never understood the culture of Yasharel, and they never wanted to. And therefore, they justified why they were not going to follow his laws. But if you understood his instructions, you would understand that their thoughts are just thoughts of rebellion and disrespect. You see, we follow Yahuwah's instructions because we trust him. But in case you have not been grown up with the respect that you should have, I want to help you with it. I saw it at a buffet, an obese older man of Yasharel who was filling up his plate. Where do you think he was going for? I mean, the plate was a mountain. There was shrimp, there was lobster, there was pork ribs, all on this plate. I wanted to go and tell this man, apply Leviticus 11 in your life. But I never got an introduction to talk with him. And I figured walking up to him and saying that, it might have offended him and turned him off, so I let it be. He was huge and literally eating the foods that were working aggressively against his body. And then they get health issues, and then they go to the doctor and put more unhealthy things in their body. You see, people see Yah's instruction as him prohibiting things from them. They love bacon, they love the shrimp, they love the way it tastes, and Yah stopping them from getting it. It's a very bad, poor attitude that they have. Yah is not trying to prohibit you or keep things from you or burden you. What he's actually trying to do is save you. He wants to preserve you. He wanted his children to be healthy and to be blessed. You see, those that would eat the clean animals would not allow the unclean animals that have parasites and that eat waste. They wouldn't be putting all that into their bodies as food. Yahuwah is the creator. He knows what animals he created as a source of food and what animals he created for other functions. Our culture of Yasharel, we reject unclean foods because we want our bodies to be healthy and to be blessed. It's as simple as that. When you understand the Torah from this perspective, it will bless you. Everyone who looks at this as a burden is in rebellion. Our Father only wants you to be healthy. He created this world and knows what's best for you. If you love him, why don't you trust him? People will trust doctors and put unknown drugs in their bodies as soon as their trusted news source and medical professionals tell them, it's okay, take it. But our Father, who has created all things, you worship as your creator of all things. They feel that he nailed this law to the cross. It's dumb. It's stupid. And it's all because they don't understand. Do shrimp and lobster still clean the waters from waste? Yeah. Do pigs still eat slop and waste? Yeah, they do. So he did not free us from this law because the instruction was to protect us, not to hinder us. If you're only looking at it as a burden and that he's trying to hinder you from this, you're looking at him wrong. So get rid of that mindset. Know your culture. Our culture is we eat what is clean and we reject unclean foods. I have made a specific video on this going deeper if you want to understand this. This is a mindset, and understand that anyone who tells you that this is done away with, they do not, I repeat, they do not understand Yah and they do not value him enough. This guidance is for your own good, for your own body, so it will be strong and be healthy. If you follow these instructions, it will keep you out of the doctor's offices and it will keep you out of the hospitals. It'll keep you off the drugs. It'll keep you off of medications and all that other nonsense. He wants us to be clean, not nasty, not unclean. So that's the first way. Eat the animals he has deemed clean. You know who wins from you rejecting that advice? The medical industry. Because of your rebellion and lack of trust and obedience to our Father, they make billions by giving you drugs made from byproducts of the oil industry and other chemicals and other artificial substances. You put all that in your body just so you can be in rebellion of his Torah, and you say that you love him. It makes no sense. It's double-minded. But let's keep understanding his instructions. After our foods, in Leviticus, he went to what our women should do after childbirth, in Leviticus 12. I'm going to read some of it. Then Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Yasharel, saying, If a woman has conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. as in the days of her customary impurity, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall then continue in the blood of her purification 33 days. She shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are fulfilled. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her customary impurity, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days. That's Leviticus chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. So I read this for a reason. You may read this and say, well, this means nothing. This has nothing to do with us because of the times that we're in. But if you understand the laws and the culture, it can help your mindset with understanding our culture. So get this straight first. Having the child did not cause the mother to be unclean. You see, Yahweh loves us and created each one of us. So it's not about having the child that made the woman unclean. So what's going on here? It's about the culture. Women didn't have the technology and the hygiene products like we have today. For me personally, I don't even really want to imagine what goes on down there after childbirth. These are things that for me and the fellas, we casually and willfully ignore. That's not our thing. But Yahweh created us and he created women. He knows what's going on. I don't know what the other nations did after women gave childbirth. I have not really researched that. But I know Yahweh did not want that blood and the other bodily fluids contaminating anything. He's about being clean. This is what this is about. The blood and other fluids that come through childbirth are what made the mother unclean for a period of time. Now, he does not specify why it's longer for if you have a female than if you have a male child, so I can't speculate and explain that. What I can explain is why he gave the command, and it's about being clean. Look at how he made it though. Verse 2 says, she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her customary impurity, she shall be unclean. And then she can't come into the temple or touch any holy things for either 33 or 66 days, depending on if it was a boy or girl. With some research, you can understand that this corresponds with the medical characteristics of childbirth. Like after 7 days, most discharges have ceased, which is why she's unclean for 7 days. But there still may be slight signs that continue for as long as 6 weeks. Yahweh did not want this to come into the temple or defile him in any way. Now, how do we handle this today? It's about the mindset. This is about cleanliness. Again, back then, Yasharel, they didn't have maxi pads and waste management systems. The way they kept germs and diseases and infections from spreading was people living according to his instructions. This is why he gave them. So how do we apply this today? Well, I will get into more of it soon when we go to chapter 15, but it's more about the mindset of not being unclean. It's about a mindset of being clean. When a woman gives birth, the first 7 days, she should be mindful of all those discharges and not go around and contaminate the world with what comes out of her body. I went over this to show you how Yah was just making rules to govern his people and protect them and to keep them clean. No other nation was guided in such intricate and perfect ways. His instructions blessed and covered his people. So for a woman in childbirth, the woman must be mindful of her uncleanness for 7 days, or 2 weeks if it's a girl. This is the culture. Let's look at more. Here's another thing that he did for his people. He taught them how to be mindful of infections. Again, they didn't have all that medical terminology and understandings that we have today. You know, in other videos, when I would talk about leprosy, I would show these images. And people would go and say and correct me, this is not leprosy, this is vitiligo. But you see, this is using modern knowledge and applying it to an ancient people. You think they had that term back then? They didn't understand it like that. There was clean leprosy and unclean, and the priests would determine what it was. Let's read some of it. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and his hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore 7 days, and the priest shall examine him on the 7th day. And indeed, if the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day. And indeed, if the sore has faded, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab should at all spread over the skin, After he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees that the scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the swelling on the skin is white and has turned the hair white, and there is a spot on raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider, and indeed, if the leprosy has uncovered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. It has all turned white. He is clean. But when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. It is leprosy. That's Leviticus chapter 13, verses 4 through 15. I'll keep reading on in the chapter. Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean. All the days he has the sore, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Leviticus chapter 13, verses 45 through 46. You see, this is not about being a burden. It was how they kept diseases and infections from infecting all the people. When things happened to them, they went to the priest to be examined, and they needed to be isolated away from the people until they were deemed clean. You know, people talk so much about not keeping the Torah, but what did everyone try to do just a few years ago when they had that major outbreak? They hypocritically jumped on these same instructions and persecuted those who did not follow them. Hypocrites. They follow the laws when the government and medical professionals tell us to do so, but when Yahuwah, the one they say that they love, gives this guidance, they don't even want to read about it and apply it because they say that this is nailed to the cross. This is not about being nailed to the cross. It's about how to keep yourself from infection and not spread it to your people. You know, an interesting fact, if you ever go to Barcelona, there's a lot of history of the Yahudim that were there before the Spanish Inquisition. You know, it was said that during the time of the plague, the Yahudim were being blamed for causing the Black Death. One reason is because though they were affected, they were not affected as much as the other nations were. They were not dying in the same numbers in the same way. And so what did the Christians do? They blamed the Yahudim, mostly because of their guilt, because of what they were doing to them, and they felt it was retribution. But also because of the fact that the Yahudim were not as affected as them. They weren't getting as sick as the others. It's because of the culture of how we dealt with disease and infection. It's their culture. When someone is unclean, they are isolated for several days until we know if it is severe or not. By practicing this within a community of people, you can see how disease does not spread the same way. We know this is true because they literally just did this with the whole world during the pandemic. But then we want to say that his Torah is done away with? That's hypocritical and ridiculous. Yah's Torah is perfect. He's covering us. If we just follow him, we will be blessed. He had instructions on dealing with this, with our clothes, with our houses. The priest would come in and examine the house, and they would make all efforts to save the house. But if the plague remained, they would destroy the house so that the sickness would not spread. This was a culture of people being led by Yah in the most beautiful way to preserve them. They didn't need all these fancy medical degrees and all that science. Yah had a way that protected his people. Why would people look at this as something that we don't need to follow? Our lives are different right now, so all this in the way that they practice this is not the same today, obviously. We don't live the same. But the mindset and the behavior is what is most important. And that brings me back to dealing with our bodily discharges. In Leviticus 15, let me read this. Speak to the children of Yasharel and say to them, when any man has a discharge from his body, his discharge is unclean, and this shall be his uncleanness in regard to his discharge. Whether his body runs with his discharge or his body is stopped up by his discharge, it is his uncleanness. Every bed is unclean on which he who has the discharge lies, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. And whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. He who sits on anything on which he who has the discharge sat, shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. Leviticus chapter 15, verses 2 through 6. Also, if any man has an emission of semen, then he shall wash all his body in water and be unclean until evening. And any garment and any leather on which there is semen, it shall be washed with water and be unclean until evening. Also, when a woman lies with a man and there is an emission of semen, they shall bathe in water and be unclean until evening. Leviticus chapter 15, verses 16 through 18. You see, discharge refers to any abnormal flow from the body, which is mainly speaking to our sexual organs. A man with discharge was unclean, as also anyone who came in contact with it, or his spit, or if he threw up, or any object that he touched. They were unclean and they were required to bathe and wash their clothes. His law commanded them to bathe and wash their clothes. They could not just be nasty people. And you know, there are many other cultures out there that are just nasty. That is not our culture. All of us, we know this. We know when we look at other things, we say, oh, they nasty. They are nasty. This is not our way. The reason why we think like this is because it's our culture. We just know this internally inside of us. That's not our culture. We are not nasty people. And it's because of the Torah. This is how he directed his people. For people to look at this as a way of burdens is really just so wrong. Let me read some more. If a woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be set apart 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. Everything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean. Also, everything that she sits on shall be unclean. Whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. And whoever touches anything that she sat on shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If anything is on her bed or on anything on which he sits, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until evening. And if any man lies with her at all, so that her impurity is on him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. Leviticus chapter 15, verses 19 through 24. You see, this was before tampons and pads. This was how our Father directed his children. This is perfect guidance. He created us and did not want us to be nasty people. This is how he kept us away from germs and toxins and diseases. This is how he protected us. This is all his law is about. He didn't say, do this so you're healthy and guarded from disease. He didn't have to say that. He taught it simple, clean and unclean. Why in the world will we look at this wonderful direction from our Father as a burden? Only reason we look at it like this is because we were taught by Satan. You must change your attitude. What we know from this is that Yahuwah did not play with what came out of our body, and he wanted his people to bathe and be clean whenever they came in contact with these things. It was their culture to bathe. Please know that the other nations, they were not taught this culture. Many of them were nasty. If you ever have a chance to go to Italy and go to Pompeii and see what they say about their bathhouses and how these people used to bathe, these people were nasty. It was nasty culture. That was not our culture. This is our culture, a clean people. He did not want to be amongst the unclean, and he wanted us clean. And this goes for everything unclean. When the army goes out against your enemies, then keep yourself from every wicked thing. If there is any man among you who becomes unclean by some occurrence in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come inside the camp. But it shall be when evening comes that he shall wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may come into the camp. Also, you shall have a place outside the camp where you may go out, and you shall have an implement among your equipment. And when you sit down outside, you shall dig with it and turn and cover your refuse. For Yahuwah your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore, your camp shall be holy, that he may see no unclean thing among you and turn away from you. That's Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 9 through 14. You see, he even had a law about when they had to go to the bathroom, what they were supposed to do. Take that shovel with you, dig it up, and then cover it back up with dirt when you're done. He was not playing with them. If you were unclean, you had to separate yourself until you became clean. Why? Because he's holy, set apart, and he does not deal with the unclean. He does not dwell amongst the wickedness of the other nations. And that's where you'll find the most important part. All the other nations to him were unclean and they were defiled. He says, do not defile yourselves with any of these things, for by all these the nations are defiled, which I am casting out before you. For the land is defiled. Therefore I visit the punishment of its iniquity upon it, and the land vomits out its inhabitants. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, either any of your own nation or any stranger who dwells among you. For all these abominations the men of the land have done who are before you, and thus the land is defiled. Lest the land vomit you out also when you defile it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. For whoever commits any of these abominations, the persons who commit them shall be cut off from among their people. Therefore you shall keep my ordinance, so that you do not commit any of these abominable customs which were committed before you, and that you do not defile yourselves by them. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Leviticus chapter 18, verses 24 through 30. He also said, but I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who has separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore distinguish between clean animals and unclean, between unclean birds and clean. You shall not make yourselves abominable by beast or by bird or by any kind of living thing that creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And you shall be holy to me, for I, Yahuwah, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. Leviticus chapter 20, verses 24 through 26. He separated Yasharel and made them clean, because the other nations were unclean to him. And what is Satan trying to do to us all today? Make us unclean, nasty, defiled. He defiles us so that we are defiled to Yah, and he cannot dwell amongst us. And what we're doing is we're coming back to him and we're cleaning up. You see, the rest of the other nations, all their ways are unclean and defiled. All of the ways of this world are an abomination to him. And what Christianity has done is basically say that the way that he feels about this has been nailed to the cross and is done away with. It's the completely wrong satanic attitude, and they got it all completely backwards. He did not change. He only blessed the other nations. He gave the other nations access to be set apart to him as well, and be redeemed and be cleansed through the blood of Yahusha. Now, in dealing with all this, there is more to understand when we understand the ways of atonement. And we also understand that other nations were not given this opportunity until Yahusha gave himself as a perfect sacrifice. And now the other nations were able to be undefiled if they came through Yahusha. And we know about this as we saw Yahusha give Peter a vision. It says, and a voice came to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, not so, Adonai, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean. And a voice spoke to him again the second time. What Elohim has cleansed, you must not call common. This was done 3 times, and the object was taken up into heaven again. As Acts chapter 10, verses 13 through 16. And you see, what Christians do is they take this and they apply it to them eating pork and not keeping the dietary laws, not understanding that this is a vision about them being blessed. You see, through the blood of Yahusha, a believing Gentile, one from the other nations, they can now be redeemed and cleansed and no longer looked at as defiled. But this comes through cleansing. And what Satan made sure he did when he planted the tares, what he did was he stole this gift from the Gentiles by preaching deception and teaching Gentiles that our Father conformed to them instead of them needing to conform to him. They never learned to know his law or respect it. From the beginning of the Christian church, the early church fathers rejected our Father's instructions, and it is completely a representation of what it is today. People argue against keeping his Torah instead of loving his instructions and wanting to learn how to abide in them. In understanding this part of the Torah with the clean and unclean, it can help understand the purpose for the Torah. He made rules, guidelines, instructions for his people that if they followed it, they would be blessed and highly favored. He would keep them from diseases and sicknesses. They would be strong and healthy, not fat and lazy. They would live long lives because they fed themselves with the foods he created to be eaten. I've seen many people that after they were diagnosed with a sickness or a cancer, they say they're going to make new health choices starting with the foods that they eat. And they promote this. While at the same time, in the same breath, they will say that they don't need to keep the law, not understanding that if they never had the attitude against keeping his law, and they actually kept the instructions that he made for us from the beginning, they probably wouldn't even have gone through the health scares that they have today. Now, granted, we have much more things coming at us because of EMF radiation, which is another story. But the foods that we eat are a big problem for many of our health issues, and people will reject the Torah because they feel that they shouldn't keep it while they take advice from the Torah without knowing it. It's hypocrisy. The point I'm making is that don't let anyone tell you that the Torah is a burden. Whether they want to recognize it or not, it's a satanic attitude. All of the rules and instructions that Yah gave us were for our benefit. And if you recognize this, you will love his Torah just like David did. Listen to David. Blessed are the undefiled in the way who walk in the law of Yahuwah. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with the whole heart. They also do no iniquity. They walk in his ways. You have commanded us to keep your precepts diligently. Oh, that my ways were directed to keep your statutes. Then I would not be ashamed when I look into all your commandments. I will praise you with uprightness of heart when I learn your righteous judgments. I will keep your statutes. Oh, do not forsake me utterly. That's Psalm chapter 119, verses 1 through 8. He also said, deal bountifully with your servant, that I may live and keep your word. Open my eyes that I may see wondrous things from your Torah. I am a stranger in the earth. Do not hide your commandments from me. My soul breaks with longing for your judgments at all times. You rebuke the proud, the cursed, who stray from your commandments. Remove me from reproach and contempt, for I have kept your testimonies. Princes also sit and speak against me, but your servant meditates on your statutes. Your testimonies also are my delight and my counselors. That's Psalm 119, verses 17 through 24. Also, he says, let your mercies come also to me, O Yahuwah, your salvation according to your word. So shall I have an answer for him who reproaches me. For I trust in your word, and take not the word of truth utterly out of my mouth. For I have hoped in your ordinances. So shall I keep your Torah continually, forever and ever, and I will walk at liberty, for I seek your precepts. I will speak of your testimonies also before kings, and will not be ashamed. And I will delight myself in your commandments, which I love. My hands also I will lift up to your commandments, which I love, and I will meditate on your statutes. Psalm chapter 119, verses 41 through 48. This is love. If you love his Torah like David did, you will see that our Father only wants to bless you and keep you healthy and keep you without disease. He's not trying to burden you. He wants to bless you. He wants to protect you. Our culture is not to be nasty and unclean. That is not our way. We are clean. And because we are clean, our Father can reside in us and feel at home. He does not dwell amongst the defiled. And that's exactly why Satan spreads a defiled culture. Know your culture, and your culture is one that is clean. You distinguish between the clean and the unclean, and you live according to the way Yahuwah created us. Yahuwah's Torah is the true masterclass, and if you follow it, you will be blessed. Now what you're doing is just understanding more of the why and how this is. We will continue to talk more about the culture in the next part. But for now, please understand that Satan has been keeping you from this to defile you. Please don't look at this in a way to just argue with me and start contentions. Understand his Torah is here to bless you. Don't let Satan keep you from it. Reject him and come back to the way our Father has always desired for us to be, and you will be utterly blessed. I promise. Come back to his Torah and learn your culture. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay. Thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share this video with others. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Also, don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. I would like to thank all those who supported this ministry and have blessed this ministry. Thank you for your contributions and letting Yah lead your heart. I am truly blessed by you. You know who you are. Be blessed. Okay. Thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.